You open the door and walk in. No, but hey guys, I'm Yes Renault, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a Harvard graduate class of 2016, and don't worry, we're gonna answer the question in this title, how to get into one of the Ivy League schools. Right, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, should I name more? No, because you guys already know the schools I'm talking about. Now, I'm a smart cookie, right? I know what you guys want. You guys want the cheat sheet, right? The stolen Scantron with all the right bubbles filled out that will tell you how to glide into one of those 8 coveted Ivies. You're like, no, Yes or no, we swear we're not here for the easy answer. And okay, shh. Don't worry, that was just my transition so that I could talk about how there is no magic formula for getting into an Ivy League school. This isn't SpongeBob, right? You can't just pull a plankton, steal the secret recipe, and get into one of these schools. But what there are very solid strategies that you can implement to help increase your chances of getting accepted. Now, I've actually spent the last 6 months working on a video guide which explains how to do just that. And if you want to, you can go check out the link down below. But if not, and you want the abridged version of how to get into the Ivies, then hang tight, because the Cliff Notes version is coming to you in 3, 2, 1. All right, now, y'all have got this stereotypical image of an Ivy League student, right? And it looks a little bit like this. Right? Basically, this brainiac who spends all day just hunched up in the library, surviving off of straight A's and the undying praise of her teachers. But that's the thing about Ivy League hopefuls, right? They're not just nerdy. They're also socially anxious. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it is true that grades and test scores alone won't get you into an Ivy League school. All right, so here are some numbers for you to chew on. Harvard rejects 1 out of every 4 perfect SAT scores, and UPenn rejects about 3 out of every 5 valedictorians, right? So grades and scores alone will not just get you in. Basically, grades and test scores, their main purpose is for helping you avoid an automatic no, right? You don't want the school to look at your transcript and pull a Meghan Trainor, right? And just be like, my name is no, right? So grades and test scores need to be adequate, so that you can at least be competitive when applying. And adequate means pretty darn near perfect, right? But adequate also means that yes, occasionally a student with an A- or a B gets in. Or maybe even, gasp, a 32 on the ACT. But, after you've secured the adequate grades and test scores so that you don't get an automatic no, then it's more important to focus on what gets you a yes. So, what gets you a yes? Well, usually a large donation made out to the school of your choice. Kidding. Sort of. No, but admission to the Ivy League schools is based off a holistic process, right? So the admissions officers want to know who you are as a whole, right? Who are you other than that kid who wakes up and eats Brainios for breakfast? And once you figure out who you are, then the best place to display it is in the extracurriculars and essay sections of the application. Those are the 2 sections where you can really focus on getting a yes, right? But newsflash, noob, if the person you happen to be after you wake up and eat Brainios for breakfast is just the kid who lounges on the couch and eats Dum-Dums all day, well, that's not gonna be very impressive to the admissions officers, right? So first, you gotta figure out what type of student you wanna be, and then once you figure it out, that's when you write about it in the essays and extracurriculars. So, who do you wanna be? In this case, the advice, you just be you, doesn't work, boo, alright? Now, the common underlying thread that weaves most Ivy League students together is usually that they have something that they're passionate about, that they work toward, and are successful at, right? But that's hella generic and doesn't really help you much, so I'm instead gonna give you a theory. There's this theory that there are 3 types of students who get into the Ivy League schools: the well-rounders, the pointy students, and the students with interesting stories. Now, the first of those students, the well-rounders, they're like King Midas, right? Pretty much everything they touch turns to gold. They are those students who do relatively well in every area, whether it's athletics, the arts, or academics. Now, of course, you will see a lot of them on Ivy League campuses, but because there are so many well-rounded students applying to the Ivy League schools, their chances of getting into an Ivy are just about as bad as the rest of ours. So when you are thinking of what type of student you want to be, don't think well-rounded, right? Because we're trying to increase your chances of getting in, and if being well-rounded doesn't do that, well then, let's try a different approach. If you want to get into an Ivy, then your odds are so much better if you're that second type of student. Right? The pointy student. You're like, pointy? Pointy? I can point all day. Well, I'll point at you. Point. No, but that's not the type of pointy I mean. Essentially, pointy students are the students who excel in one area to an extremely high level. I'm talking national, international level. They're successful. Essentially, the pointier you are, the better your chances of getting accepted. Why? Well, there are a couple reasons, but the main one is that top-tier schools want top-tier students. You think for a second that Brown would even consider denying Emma Watson a spot just because, she's not a good basketball player? Doubt it. No, they Wingardium Leviosa her right into their school, right? Because she was an incredibly good actress who was pointy in the arts, right? She stood out. But you don't have to be Hermione Granger to stand out. All you need to do if you want to be pointy is win national math competitions or win international sports titles or poetry competitions or show that your thoughts are 1 in a million. You're right, it is kind of hard. No, but essentially, while it is harder to be a pointy applicant, it's much easier to get into an Ivy by being a pointy applicant than by being a well-rounded student. But you guys are convinced by numbers, so if you actually want to see someone who's worked out the numbers on this, I've posted a link down below. Alan Chang, another former Harvard student, did a great write-up about it, so you can go check him out. But getting back to the point, essentially, you want to be pointy. And if you're not pointy, well, then I would make like Hollywood and cake on the fake, right? Don't lie, right? But do learn how to, on the application, paint yourself in a way that makes you appear as pointy as possible, right? I mean, you guys are the Kim K generation. Learn how to contour and define your angles, which in practice means on the app, don't talk about every little single thing you do, right? Pick your main 1 or 2 strengths and flesh them out, right? Because that will make you sound a lot more unique and a lot less generic. But now we need to talk about the third type of student, the interesting story. Now, essentially, we already know that you have the best odds of getting accepted if you are a pointy student. It's essentially a bonus if you also happen to be a student with an interesting story. A student with an interesting story is somebody who has had extraordinarily unique life circumstances that would help them bring a new perspective to campus. While it may be extraordinary to down 7 cups of Diet Dr. Pepper in less than a minute, that's not the type of extraordinary these schools are looking for. These Ivies crave diversity, right? Whether it's race, religion, geography, you name it, these Ivies want students from different walks of life who will come to campus and help educate their fellow students. So think, for interesting story, something like, were you raised on boats your whole life? Or Did you grow up with two dads? Or maybe you've seen the Venezuelan currency crisis up close and personal, right? That would make you an interesting story because not everybody at the Ivies has had these experiences. In fact, most of us just grew up in the traditional, suburban white picket fence 2.5 children type of scenario. Right, so the more unique your experience, the more likely your chances of getting accepted for it. Right, and all the more reason to talk about it in your essays. There you have it, right? That is the general idea of how to get into one of these Ivy League schools. Essentially, you have to just understand that grades and test scores are for avoiding an automatic no, and then after you've secured adequate enough grades and test scores, then you focus on getting a yes. And the types of students who are most likely to get a yes are pointy students, right? Bonus points if you have an interesting story. And then once you've nailed down how you're gonna show that you're pointy or show that you have an interesting story, that's when you talk about it in your essays and extracurriculars. That's like the wham bam hula shazam strategy, right? I mean, it's very broad, very overarching, and of course I wish I could dive more in it with you, right? But frankly, YouTube doesn't have the attention span for all of that. You're like, what are you talking about? Of course we have the attention span. Ooh, shiny object. Right, so YouTube is not the place to get into the nitty gritty, but I have actually answered all of those questions in my video guide, right? So if you want the answers to those questions, feel free, check it out down below, the link somewhere in the description. But actually, guys, can we just talk about this for a second? So that massive video guide, essentially just like an online tutor for people who want to get into the Ivies, that's what I've been spending my last 6 months working on, right? It was essentially just a brain drain of all my knowledge about Harvard, the Ivy Leagues, pumped into one guide so that I can kind of shut the chapter on Harvard in my YouTube videos, right? I'm gonna be moving on with new content. So you guys might get maybe 1 or 2 new videos about Harvard from me, but I'm moving on, right? So I am closing this book and handing it over to you. This is my nerdy baton from one Ivy League student to hopefully one day another. I am wishing you good luck in the application process. Until then, it is summertime, so just sit back, relax, and bye. No.